Trial night. "I will fulfill all the wishes of the king," said the 15-year-old princess. Her mother and her crowned brother were shocked. Of course. The groom demanded the unthinkable, a trial night. In a message sent to the Portuguese royal court, the German monarch asked to taste the dish before buying. The ancient custom almost disappeared in the enlightened 15th century, but King Frederick could not resolve his doubts in any way. He was not convinced by the portrait of the princess sent to Germany, nor by the report of the most loyal ambassadors who thoroughly knew the tastes of the sovereign. Most likely, the matchmaking would have ended there because the bride's family considered the custom barbaric. Eleanor's own position was decisive. The young beauty stamped her foot and exclaimed, "Trial night, so trial night." Late at night on September 18, 1434, a significant event took place in the castle of the Portuguese kings in Torres Vedras. Queen Eleanor of Aragon was delivered from a burden by a charming girl. The father, King Duarte I of Portugal, was quite pleased with the birth of his daughter because he already had a male heir to the throne. The baby was named after her mother, Eleanor. Barely having had time to be born, the girl was involved in a terrible maelstrom of historical events that shook Portugal in the first half of the 15th century. In 1438, when Eleanor was only 4 years old, a plague epidemic struck the country, which claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, including the life of the baby's father. Duarte I died suddenly, and a 6-year-old boy Afonso V became the new king of Portugal. On March 20, 1439, after the death of her husband, Queen Eleanor gave birth to a daughter, Joanna. Meanwhile, the situation around the family of the late Duarte I was heating up. Duarte, on the eve of his death, managed to make a will, according to which Queen Eleanor was to become regent under the minor monarch. However, the Portuguese nobility did not fulfill the will of the late monarch and proclaimed the guardian of the late king's brother, Duke Pedro of Portugal of Coimbra. Pedro hated the dowager queen. In the summer of 1439, Eleanor of Aragon had to hastily flee from the royal residence of Almerim. Her eldest daughter, Eleanor, was seriously ill, and the mother faced a terrible choice to save her younger daughter or to die together. Taking Joanna, the queen hid from her pursuers in the castle of Credo, which was considered one of the most fortified in Portugal. The eldest girl, Eleanor, stayed in Almerim and soon met her uncle Pedro. Contrary to the dowager queen's fears, Pedro was not a devil in the flesh at all. He treated his niece in a fatherly way, invited the best doctors to her, who, in fact, pulled the girl out of the other world. Meanwhile, the regent's troops besieged the castle of Credo and forced the garrison to surrender. Eleanor of Aragon escaped from the castle under the cover of night, leaving baby Joanna at the mercy of her uncle. Pedro appointed nieces tutors from the most notable aristocrats of Portugal. Princess Eleanor fell into the richest de Castro family, the Counts de Adagua. In 1449, King Afonso V turned 17 years old, and he demanded that his uncle, the regent, hand over the entire throne to him. However, Pedro refused to voluntarily relinquish power. Meanwhile, the mother of Afonso V, the exiled Queen Eleonora, enlisting the support of her Aragonese relatives, created a strong army, which in the Battle of Alfarrabara inflicted a crushing defeat on the supporters of Pedro of Portugal. The Duke of Coimbra himself was killed by an arrow during the battle. Afonso V finally established himself on the throne. Systematically strengthening his power, the king thought about how to marry his sister Eleanor profitably. By that time, the 15-year-old princess had turned into a real beauty, and rumors about her charm had spread far beyond Portugal. There were a lot of marriage proposals, but Afonso V settled on the candidacy of the 35-year-old King of Germany Frederick IV of Habsburg. Frederick had every chance of becoming Holy Roman Emperor in the near future, and it was incredibly flattering for Afonso V to be related to such a majestic European monarch. The idea of marriage was put forward by Isabella of Portugal, aunt of Afonso V, sister of Pedro of Portugal, who was killed by an arrow. Isabella was married to Duke Philip III of Burgundy and wanted to strengthen the ties of her new homeland with Portugal. Alfonso of Aragon, King of Naples, Princess Eleanor's maternal uncle, agreed to mediate the marriage. Alfonso's support at that time meant a lot since he was the most powerful king of the Mediterranean. All the marriage negotiations took place in Naples. Frederick IV, whom many prominent kings of Europe longed to see as the husband of their daughters, was in the strongest thoughts to dispel the sovereigns. The king liked the portrait, and the ambassadors did not spare words in describing the beauty of the girl, regular features of a delicate face, unusually expressive eyes and golden hair, elegant body shapes. Nevertheless, the inveterate bachelor Friedrich, who was distinguished by an incredibly anxious character, did not give a final answer about the wedding. Afonso V wanted to marry his sister to Habsburg, so much that he even turned to Pope Nicholas V for help. His Holiness entered into correspondence with Frederick and soon informed Afonso that the German king required a trial night procedure before entering into marriage. The custom of trial night was quite widespread in the Middle Ages, especially in the German lands. It was believed that this tradition protects a man from getting a pig in a poke. Nicholas V told Afonso that the procedure is quite legal, common among German monarchs, and therefore the pontiff gives his highest blessing to it. Afonso, who loved his sister dearly, was ready to refuse, but Eleanor herself intervened. The princess really wanted to become the Queen of Germany and possibly the Empress of the Holy Roman Empire. As a result, the girl agreed to a trial night. The ceremony was to take place in Naples. Eleanor went there on several ships carrying a dowry of 60,000 guilders, of which 50,000 were intended for Frederick. The trip to Naples was the hardest test for Eleanor, and it almost cost the princess her life. At first, the flotilla was attacked by pirates. They managed to fight them off, but the Portuguese were badly battered. Then the flotilla was caught in a violent storm that scattered the ships. As a result, the bride arrived in Italy on a single ship. When she was no longer expected to be seen, rumors spread throughout Europe that Eleanor had died. It was only in November 1451 that the 17-year-old princess met her 36-year-old fiancé in Siena. The trial night, apparently, went well, since Friedrich did not refuse the bride. But the bachelor king continued to doubt and pulled the bagpipes. It seemed that the wedding would not happen, and poor Eleanor crossed the Mediterranean in vain, agreed to a humiliating trial night in vain. However, an event soon occurred that made Friedrich hurry up. The Dauphin of France, the 28-year-old son of King Charles VII the Victor, declared his interest in Eleanor of Portugal. Frederick immediately appealed to Afonso V with a request to conclude an agreement on the upcoming marriage. The document was quickly drawn up. On March 16, 1452, the wedding of the King of Germany and the Portuguese princess took place in Rome. Frederick and Eleanor were declared husband and wife by Pope Nicholas V himself. Exactly 3 days after the wedding, King Frederick IV of Germany was proclaimed the new emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and Eleanor became empress. Friedrich gave his wife a second name, Elena, more famous and popular in his homeland. Eleanor's family life was quite prosperous at that time, although not cloudless. The husband spent a lot of time with his young wife, treated her quite respectfully. However, at the prim and meager Viennese court, the empress, accustomed to luxury, balls and entertainment in Portugal, was very bored. Eleanor ate up boredom with various sweets and spicy Portuguese dishes, which were prepared for her by chefs brought from her homeland. During the first few years of her life with Frederick, the empress gave birth to 5 children, but only 2 of them survived. It was whispered at court that Eleanor herself was to blame for the deaths of her 3 children, and the emperor agreed with these rumors. The fact is that the empress spoiled the kids, thoughtlessly fed them a huge amount of sweets. As a result, the children were constantly ill. Frederick, noticing something was wrong, took Prince Maximilian and Princess Kunigunde from his mother. The kids were assigned a strict diet consisting mainly of fruits and vegetables, which the modest emperor grew in his own garden. This gave the result: Maximilian and Kunigunde quickly got stronger. Eleanor initially expressed dissatisfaction with the Spartan conditions in which the emperor raised his children, but then resigned herself. Gradually, Frederick, who was distinguished by unprecedented avarice and was always in debt, reduced the empress's court staff to such an extent that it practically did not differ from the court of some noble German lady. When Afonso V sent an escort of 80 knights and 20 court ladies from Portugal to Vienna, Frederick sent them all back, leaving a single maid. The restrictions that the emperor imposed on the young wife tempered her character. This was very useful to Eleanor in 1461, when Vienna was besieged by Frederick II's younger brother, Archduke Albrecht I of Austria, who enjoyed great popular support. The imperial family was locked in the castle, and in order to survive, Frederick, Eleanor and their children had to eat dogs, cats and rats. At this terrible time, Friedrich, seemingly hardened by a Spartan upbringing, almost broke down, and the soft-hearted Eleanor showed unprecedented courage and will. The woman cooked rodent soup for her husband and children with her own hands, ate it herself, fed the children and the weak-willed spouse. It was only thanks to Eleanor that the family survived. After Albrecht captured Vienna, the imperial family was held captive for some time. Only in 1463, after the sudden death of his younger brother, Frederick managed to restore his power. Despite Eleanor's selfless behavior during the siege of Vienna, Friedrich continued to reproach his wife for the death of his children, expressed dissatisfaction with how his wife was raising offspring. The emperor believed that Eleanor continued to spoil Maximilian, putting his health and life at risk. The boy who was to become a monarch should eat simple and coarse food, and certainly not overseas sweets and spicy delicacies. One day Maximilian became very ill, and Friedrich, extremely frightened by the prospect of losing an heir, publicly accused his wife of the boy's indisposition. For Eleanor, these accusations were a heavy blow. In 1466, Frederick and Eleanor had their last child, John. The baby was given to the Empress hard. She almost died in childbirth. The boy was born weak, and a few months later he died. This caused a new hail of reproaches from Friedrich towards his wife, who believed that Eleanor's poor diet made her weak and unable to give birth to strong children. The husband's heartless reaction broke the woman. Eleanor began to get seriously ill. Having come to his senses, Friedrich sent his wife to the waters, found her the best doctors, but in vain. On September 3, 1467, the Empress of the Holy Roman Empire Leonora Elena of Portugal died at the age of 32. Friedrich, having lost his wife, was inconsolable. He outlived his wife by 26 years, but never married again. Before her death, Eleanor bequeathed to knocked out on her monument simple but such piercing words: "The earth has never known such a humble wife as me." When Friedrich was given the will of his wife, he burst into tears, but, nevertheless, ordered this inscription to be made. Eleanor was buried in Niklauster in the tomb of the German kings. This was the fate of a woman who humbly went to the trial night and in the future was forced to agree to all the demands of her husband.